Cool. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to pass it over to our host to get us kicked off.
Hi, all. So as people are coming in, can you hear me okay? So I am zooming on the school computer and trying to figure that out. So as people are coming in, if you want to add into the chat, just quickly introduce yourself so you can share your name, pronouns, where you're coming to us from, and your role and relationship to our schools in Vermont, whether that's as an educator, caregiver, student, or community member, or whatever other way you find yourself relating to schools. And then if you want to speak to, no pressure on this, right? This is not you have to identify the most important political moment, but just what's on your mind, or political issue, but what's on your mind in this really challenging moment about what could affect or is already affecting your school community. And, as we talk about social justice unionism, a big piece of that is thinking about how we are organizing in our unions to address the issues that are affecting our communities at large. So if folks want to share that out, that's great. And you can put that in the chat. And we're going to get started officially in about 2 minutes. Great, and welcome to people who are just joining now. We're sharing in the chat, just briefly introducing ourselves with our name, pronouns, where we're located, and our role and relationship to schools, however you find yourself relating to our schools in Vermont. And then maybe naming an issue that's on your mind right now that might is already or might be affecting your school community in the context we're finding ourselves in. So thanks everyone to sharing, and we'll get started in a minute. Great. Thank you. So I'm just seeing the housing crisis, educator shortages, funding disparities, all the parental rights bills and the contradictions that those bring, especially for those of us who spent so many years organizing around parent voice and community voice in education and what that's taken on to look like, LGBTQ student issues, immigrant students, impacts on BIPOC students, all of the funding challenges we're facing in our region, healthcare coverage, deportation, threats. So many things that are facing our schools. So thank you all who are joining and continuing to join. So great to be here with folks. So my name is Perry-Bellow Handleman. I'm here presenting with Tracy, Curtin, Tevye, Kelman, and Alyssa Chen. We are all folks who are education justice activists, whether through our union or through the Education Justice Coalition of Vermont, and have been educators in Vermont, and we'll be speaking about our experiences as well in Boston and the Bay Area and California, and drawing on that for today's talk together with you all. So our goals for today are to define this term social justice unionism. What exactly is that we're talking about? And go over some key concepts, some things starting to lay the groundwork of some pieces that we find critical to the basic building blocks of what social justice unionism looks like, and draw on some of our experiences in experiments with building social justice union movements from the different places that we've worked and organized. And then towards in the second half of the meeting, we'll have a chance to move into breakout groups to really talk about what the implications are for Vermont and what it could look like in Vermont to be organizing using these principles with our school worker unions. So that's what today will look like. We're going to be wrapping at 6. And I'm going to now pass it to Tevye, who is going to really take us into breaking down this concept of social justice unionism and what it is and what it is not.
Thanks, Perry. Thank you all for being here. So we wanted to start out by just kind of defining what we're talking about, or at least the broad contours of what we're talking about when we're talking about social justice unionism. And I think the best way to do that is kind of by contrast to kind of the dominant, unfortunately, form of unionism at this point in the United States, which we're going to call business unionism. So where in a business unionism context, you usually have decisions being made by mostly paid staff and maybe a close circle of elected officials. There's a much more democratic decision-making structure that engages rank and file members in a social justice union. In a business union, you've got kind of a strategy that's oriented toward pretty narrow definition of what unions do, wages, benefits, whereas and also sort of this thinking of teaching as a profession, maybe not fully part of the working class. In a social justice union, you've got a much broader orientation where, sort of understanding the wage and benefit issues can't really be separated from social and economic justice issues, and seeing educators as workers, part of a community that kind of rises and falls together. In a business union, we often see engagement with politics mostly through professional lobbying and through kind of a more passive endorsement or get out the vote engagement with electoral politics, whereas social justice unionism, through politicizing and educating its members, can engage in direct action and mass mobilizations, up to and including strikes to achieve political goals outside of the context of elections. And in a business union, there's often a culture that's really tentative or even hostile at times about sort of democratizing and mobilizing the rank and file, and is lukewarm or against any calls for kind of deeper systemic change or confrontation with power holders, whereas that's kind of what a social justice union is built to do, and to kind of embrace opportunities to mobilize and educate new leaders through engaging in confrontation with power holders for these goals. So that's what we're talking about tonight. And we're gonna, for the next 20 minutes or so, dig into kind of 3 themes or kind of key concepts in social justice unionism. The first one is bargaining for the common good. The second one is the idea of a social justice caucus within a union. And the third one is community solidarity. So I am going to pass it. Perry, is this
Me.
you? No, okay.
Yep. Thanks, Tev. Hi, everyone. It's really exciting to see a lot of ideas already in the chat here. I'm going to just build on what Tev was describing here. And Tev, you can actually put all the principles up here. So the first principle we're going to talk about of social justice union is bargaining for the common good. This was kind of made really kind of famous, I guess, in the union world in the 2012 Chicago Teachers Union strike. So in this strike, the CTU not only was bargaining for wages and benefits, but they are also bargaining for community demands that went way broader than the scope of traditional business union demands. So in that strike, the CTU won nurses and social workers in every school in Chicago public schools. They also won protections for their immigrant students, so deeming their district a sanctuary school district. So this was about 12 years ago. And since then, many more unions across the country have started bargaining for the common good. So this always expands the scope of negotiations and really redefines what those are. It does this by bringing not only educators, school staff, but by really bringing the community's demands to the negotiating table. It breaks down the class barrier between school workers and the community that we can often see. And this happens through really deep organizing. So I'm going to talk more about this, and so is Perry, what it looks like to really build solidarity with community organizations, and as well as deeper organizing within our unions. And so developing a really strong and engaged membership that can lead to what Tev was saying about a mass mobilization of a union. Bargaining for the common good also directly confronts systemic injustice. It centers racial justice. And these campaigns, importantly, don't end when the contract is settled. So something we'll talk about, and what we see in examples of common good bargaining across the country are that even when a contract is signed, these campaigns don't end. So they are going on for years and years. They're building power over time. Tab, you can go to the next one. Thanks. So in this next chat, in this next slide, we're going to look at some examples of demands from other educator unions. And while I'm going through some of these, I'm going to put a question in the chat because I have a feeling there's already some ideas in the room. What common good demands could you imagine bargaining for in your current local or in your current school or workplace? We're coming from some different places here, which is awesome tonight. So wherever you are in your current place, what could you imagine bargaining for? So a couple of examples from UTLA, the LA Teachers Union. They were able to demand a reallocation of the astronomical amount of money that was devoted to policing in their schools to other public needs, such as housing and public health. In this same contract, LA also won an end to randomized, aka racialized student searches in their schools. LA was also demanding immigration resources, which was asking the district to provide trainings and other resources for students and staff, as well as they were asking for $1 million immigration legal defense fund in their schools. Thanks for these contributions. In Denver, they were demanding restorative practice, training, social emotional training, equity support practices in their contract. In Oklahoma, which is a statewide education union, kind of like we are in Vermont, they demanded that the state institute a higher tax on oil production, gas production, motor fuels to fund public education. And in St. Paul, this teachers union had a really powerful housing justice demand in their contract. They demanded that the school district divest from banks that foreclose on students and their families during the school year. And just also to note that St. Paul's union was able to end harsh racist disciplinary practices in their schools through their contract work as well. Thank you for these contributions. I'm going to put this question in one more time, and feel free, yeah, Tev, you can move forward, but feel free to keep these ideas coming. Okay. So here I'm going to talk about an example from Boston. Before I lived in Vermont, I was a member of the Boston Teachers Union for 6 years, and was able to do organizing for housing justice while I was there. So the purpose of this story that I want to tell is to show how a campaign can go from non-existent to putting demands in a contract. So in 2021 in Boston, a group of teachers, guidance counselors, paraprofessionals, family coordinators just kind of started having casual conversations. This was in the neighborhood of East Boston. And they were noticing this pattern in their school where a lot of students across grade levels were being evicted from their homes. It was affecting their school experience. In a lot of cases, the students were having to change schools or leave the district altogether. And this group of educators and school staff decided to form a committee together. And this committee lived within the Boston Teachers Union. And so the structure of the BTU kind of allows these smaller campaign committees to live within the union. And so once the committee was formed, the next step was that we started forming a relationship with this amazing city organization called City Life Vita Urbana, which has been around for decades, supporting tenants' rights, supporting housing justice in the city. And we started attending each other's meetings. We went in solidarity to their rallies. We learned a lot from this community organization, and this wonderful organizer named Renelle would come to all of our meetings, and we built a deep relationship with them over a couple of years. And with that, we also collaborated within our union with a group called the Unafraid Educators, who were working for immigrant students and families. And they had a deeper history of this social justice union organizing work within Boston. They had been around for many years. And so this kind of combination of community solidarity, building relationships, and also inter-union organizing helped us build our initial power. So before we wrote any common good demands, we took a few different actions. We endorsed some city and state legislation for stable and safe housing in the city. We wrote op-eds for local news outlets. We passed a housing justice resolution within the BTU, which passed at 91% at the time. And then we worked on establishing some contract demands to bring to the negotiating team. You can move forward, Tab. So the last part of the story that I want to share with you are what these demands were that we ended up writing. So this was in 2021. And the first demand was that we wanted to create a working group to identify unused city-owned spaces to be converted into public housing for families of Boston Public School students. Secondly, at the time, the city and BPS were already partners in a pilot program to house homeless families of 165 students in Boston. But what we called for in the contract was to expand this work with the goal of eliminating homelessness for families in Boston within 5 years. Thirdly, we advocated that no evictions or foreclosures would take place during the school year for BPS families and support small-scale landlords who needed it to ensure they were able to maintain their mortgages. And then last, we called on the city to require developers who are building within a half-mile radius of a BPS school to meet with the school site council to negotiate affordable housing and ongoing community input with an opportunity to consult with the BTU Housing Justice Committee beforehand. So we submitted these 4 demands. All of them were rejected pretty much immediately. which I think is an important part of the story, and wasn't really surprising at the time. And so what happened at that point was we built a lot more power with families, with BPS families, and that proved to be really valuable in this work. And so through building relationships with families over the course of the next year, working more deeply with city life, this contract eventually was passed with an increased funding to house homeless students and families. And so it was a start of this work. In Boston, they're currently in the heat of contract negotiations again, and there are over double these amount of demands around housing justice being brought to the negotiating table. So I think it's an important part of the story that this work is ongoing. It's gradual, and it does build power over time. Perry, I think I'm passing it to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Tracy, for sharing that. So I think that, like, as we think about as we were thinking together, like Tracy and Tev and Alyssa and I, about what does it take to get to a place where it's even on the table to win any of these common good demands as part of our union work, there were two kind of key ideas we really wanted to focus on. One is what not all, but many of these examples that Tracy laid out, the unions that were able to win common good demands, started their organizing through the process of building social justice caucuses within the educator unions that they were a part of. So a social justice caucus is a group with an orientation towards social justice values and building rank and file power that works within the broader union context. And I would add to that also a kind of willingness and orientation towards what we might talk about as like union militancy, but a recognition that moving towards direct actions and strikes is part of and actually the only real key component of how we can and what leverage we have as educators, right? The willingness to go on strike is the key piece of what gives us leverage to win anything for ourselves or the communities that we're a part of. And so a caucus may organize campaigns and actions. It definitely will conduct some political education, and it can develop a platform and a set of candidates to contest union elections. And oftentimes over time, caucuses move towards positions of union leadership. And one key question is, how do we keep our union leaders accountable that emerge out of our caucuses once we start to take power within our unions? Social caucuses have been formed around a range of issues and identities. There are Black, LGBTQIA+, radical, rank and file, environmental caucuses within educators' unions around the country. And in recent years, caucuses have been a key tool in building powerful labor movements. This includes within the education movements that we've seen, really this like growth of strikes, or teacher strikes and educator strikes around the country in the past decade plus. As well as other union movements, right? So the United Auto Workers also was really driven in its radicalism through caucus work. So the other thing we wanted to speak about is this idea of community solidarity, right? That a key piece of what we're doing in our social justice unionism work is building relationships and reorienting our union work towards the work of broad solidarity. So this looks like the work of building trusting relationships with caregivers and students, showing up for our students and community outside of the classroom as well as inside of it, like the ways that we show up in deep ways in our school buildings and the ways we show up when crises happen in the towns we live in. It looks like building camaraderie between teachers and other school workers. And I am seeing a lot of this in the chat, right? Like for many of us who are in the teachers or counselors or in like that, the Vermont Education Association is often divided. Some of us have joint unions of ESP workers and quote unquote teachers. Many of us have separate locals. And so what is the work of really building that joint solidarity and building with other school workers, staff, custodial staff, et cetera, and breaking down the class divisions that keep us siloed and less powerful. It looks like the work of building mutual aid and strategic alignment with other educator and non-educator unions. And it's really nice to see folks that are joining us from other rank and file union members and organizers in Vermont towards strengthening the labor movement as a whole. It means meaningful support for social justice organizations and movements, right? And really positioning ourselves as union members within the context of broader social justice struggle. And it requires really deep work with our members and locals, right? It requires ongoing political education and relationship building with members and in our locals towards shifting the perspective of what the role is of the union, deepening social justice awareness, and fostering a sense of agency about our power to create broad transformation. So what I was going to jump in with now was talking about my experience experimenting with this in Oakland. And I just want to say the caveat of like, all of our work in movements is messy, right? And I want to present some powerful things that I think we've accomplished and also say along the way that like, it's an experiment, right? And that there's a lot of learning that happens. And I think one of the points that's really rich in like Oakland's story is that we're actually now at a place in 2024 where there's multiple social justice caucuses in Oakland who are debating and engaging with each other around what does it really mean to have a social justice union. So this is like rich in that sense. Anyway, so I started organizing in Oakland as an educator with a caucus that came to be known as Classroom Struggle. We came together in the wake of the Occupy Oakland protests and at a time of kind of deep austerity in Oakland as tech was moving into the Bay. And our first work that brought us together as educators and caregivers and students was in a fight to stop the proposed closure of 30 schools in the district. And that was not work that the union had really taken on at the time. I think the union was kind of seeing itself in a pretty tricky political position. And we as a caucus, which was both working inside and outside of the union, were able to do things a little differently. So our work looked like a ton of media work, but a lot of media work that was enabled because we occupied one of the schools that was up for closure for a month, right? So a pretty radical militant action to be taken. We organized rallies and protests and countless community meetings with parents and community members. And we're able to stop the closure of 25 of those 30 schools. And that really galvanized energy around that work and I think convinced a lot of educators in Oakland who were committed to social justice values but weren't sure about union work that the union could be a valuable way to really enact their values because of the ways that we engaged the union in that process. Over the next several years, we moved the union to endorse teach-ins, educational educational leafleting, student actions. For example, in 2016, in the wake of the first Trump election, we organized immigrant know your rights teach-ins. We organized a teach-in day across the city, and we organized leafleting in the mornings as caregivers were dropping off their kids with know your rights materials, right? And got the union to endorse and financially support that work. When students organized a walkout on inauguration day in 2017, is that correct? Yep. We had the union fiscally and endorse that and fiscally support the students and show up to support with safety and media. We did a ton of political education with our members. And so that looked like these like 25-minute political education modules. It was an idea that we actually got from the Social Justice Caucus in North Carolina to do these victory lunches, where we would do like a victory lunch and get educators together once a week to celebrate their wins in the school, celebrate successes, and kind of build positive morale. And then we'd use those as opportunities to do political education with our members, or like do work around understanding the contract campaign, et cetera. And in the process of kind of building our caucus, we launched the School's Oakland Students Deserve Coalition, which brought together union members, caregivers, students, and community organizations. Tev, if you want to move to the next slide. So starting in 2015, we started running for union election. And over the course of the next few years, got to a place where the majority of the board of the union was allied with our caucus. And as we became more of a governing force in the Oakland Education Association, we started, the union started joining and participating in more, in contributing more resources to the broad social justice coalitions in Oakland and the Bay Area at large. We launched school board policy campaigns to address systemic issues in our schools. So we did both the common good demands work using our contract to win demands, but also really became a policy force in Oakland. And some of those wins looked like in 2021, eventually being able to pass the reparations for Black students policy. Now that was hard-won work. That was 7 years of organizing towards the policy for reparations for Black students package of funding and initiatives throughout the district. But that we were kind of able to spearhead with the School's Oakland Students Deserve Coalition. Another example is in 2020, when the pandemic reopening contract organizing was happening. The union included broad safety measures to protect both Oakland school workers and families, and really incorporating demands that they were hearing from the community about what they wanted reopening to look like. In the past year, the Oakland Education Association has stood strongly in support of members' free speech rights to teach about Palestine. So teachers independent from the union, many connected to some of these caucuses, I said again, now there's multiple, organized Oakland Teach-In Day and a whole set of lesson plans around the struggle for liberation in Palestine. And as you all can imagine, received tremendous backlash from that. And the union really showed up to support educators in that. And the union also showed up as part of the larger Bay Area Labor for Palestine Coalition, and engaging in port shutdowns and a lot of actions around this international struggle and solidarity. So all of this has moved towards a culture where I say, like, this is the caveat, I think, is moving towards, right? It's not perfect, but a culture in a really radically different way than when I started teaching in Oakland 16 years ago, where community members in Oakland see educators and see the Oakland Educators Association, the teachers union, as essential partners in creating a better Oakland. So what that means is, during the last week-long contract strike that the OEA engaged in as part of their contract campaign, students organized walkouts in solidarity with teachers who were on strike, and caregivers brought our members food on the picket lines, right? So there's this back and forth of solidarity that has been built over time. And with that, I'm gonna pass it on to Alyssa, who's gonna get us into breakout rooms to think about what it would look like to do this here.
Hey everyone, so I'm going to open some breakout rooms in about a minute. We will have 2 of each version because we have a lot of folks out tonight, which is awesome. It's going to be pick your own breakout room, and we'll have about 4 to 6 people per room. So if you see one's like busting, maybe try a different one. The first topic is housing crisis and support for unhoused students. The next is coming attacks on immigrant families, and there was a mention of sanctuary schools policy. The last one is increasing local and federal pressure to cut the school budgets. In your groups, feel free to introduce yourselves and then work on some of these questions. I'll just read these out and then I'll open the groups and we'll be good to go. Also, Tracy, can you put the slide deck in here just so people, if they go into the rooms, can maybe the slide number 2 so they can kind of have these questions up and maybe put the
Yeah.
questions in the chat as well. Thanks.
Yeah.
So how is this issue affecting students, families, or other folks in your community? What would it look like to have a social justice union movement that was able to confront this issue and able to act on it? What are the obstacles or challenges to organizing around this issue? And what do we need to overcome these challenges? So I'm going to open the rooms and we'll be in the rooms for, I don't know, where we're at for time, y'all. Like, is it 15 minutes or?
Yes, 15 minutes. Although actually we're a little ahead of schedule, so it might even be able to be like 18 minutes.
18. Okay, we'll do 18. If you need, I'm going to be around. So if you need help getting into a room, oh wait, did I do these wrong? Oops. I think I might have done them not choose your own. Let me try this one more time. Apologize. Close all rooms. Let me try this again. Oh no, whoops. They were actually fine. Are they fine? Sorry, y'all. We got room technical difficulties. Let me open them again. Oi. Oh, sorry, guys. I didn't see people going in, so I thought you couldn't see them. Apologize. Maybe 15 minutes now.
I think we're good.
Oh, I'll open all rooms. Here we go.
I think we have to open the
Okay,
rooms.
I opened them again. Can people see them? Great, I just opened them again.
They're not coming up. Maybe you have to get rid of the
Here, I can move anyone. If anyone does not see them, tell me where you want to go and I'll move you there, I think.
Can you get rid of the slide? And that might be,
Yeah, let's see. You want to stop the share, whoever's sharing?
yeah.
And
yeah,
one
yeah.
tip is if you don't see it, if you can find more and then click breakout rooms at the bottom, you should be able to see them and click join.
Perfect.
Yeah, look for those 4 squares, or in the more looks like 3 dots. And anyone that can't get in, just tell me where you want to go and I have the power to move you. Yeah, anyone having trouble getting in, let me know. Oops. Anyone having trouble moving? Happy to move people. You good? Okay. Should we go to a room?
I just can't decide. Sorry.
Just one thought
Okay.
is, oh, that's Britta. Hi, Britta.
Want me to move Britta? No, I'm just kidding. Britta can't decide.
So are we gonna have people just share like a report back or something on the other end of it?
Yeah, no, let's see where we're at with time.
I think that 15 minutes is plenty of time.
Yeah.
And then having each group like
Have a little time to share out.
something.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Let me
think
just do the
we're
time on
really
it.
good on time.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds great. I think it'd be really nice to have people share.
Mhm.
We will stop. Let's say 14 minutes from now. That will be, what will that be? 5:50. Am I doing the math right? 52?
Mhm.
5:52, about that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna go in a room and then I will I'll give people maybe a 3-minute reminder and have someone ready to share out.
Awesome.
Okay. What time would that be? 5:40. Want to set a timer for 5:49? Okay, I'm gonna go into this housing one.
15 minutes?
Yeah.
I work for Vermont NEA as the UNICEF director, which is like a union rep. And actually, Twinfield is one of the schools in my district. So I work very closely with the Caledonia Central Education Association. Tracy, I think I've been in touch with some folks that you work with over at Maple Hill.
Awesome. Yes. Yes. We will talk more, I'm sure. So let's see. I know sometimes the questions go away.
Yeah, just put them in the chat again if is that people see that?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see them.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear other folks' thoughts about this. Like what issues do you see affecting families, students, folks in your community right now, and what do we kind of anticipate in the months and year ahead? I know we're in the housing group. I have housing top of mind. I know it's always an issue for the population that we serve at Maple Hill, and I just anticipate it.
Mhm.
I anticipate this problem to be increasingly in crisis over the next few years. And I just, you know, I really see our role as educators and folks who work in and around schools. We're like in such a prime position to be able to support this because we really know what's going on. So yeah, I'm curious about other folks' experience with this.
I'll jump in there. I've been teaching for 25 years, and I would say I've never had so many students who are experiencing homelessness, being raised by grandparents, and have family members who are incarcerated. I'm really glad to be attending this meeting, and I'm really appreciative to connect with you, Joe, around the NEA, because I have called them multiple times over the years and said, when do we use our collective power? When do we organize? Why are we okay with the governor ending the emergency housing vouchers this fall? Why did the NEA and all of us not just I don't understand why we didn't use that moment to organize. I just don't understand. So I'm really grateful to be in connection with all of you.
Yes. Yeah, one curiosity I have, I think it's obviously impacting students and then it impacts staff and that impacts students. And so I know like after school programs are being cut, para educators and like it's all these positions that are serving our most vulnerable students. And so there's kind of this like dual thing with staff and with students. And I am curious kind of like what it where are the levers? Are we using the lever like at the local district level to push on the city, or are we like using the statewide lever of the NEA? And so I'm just curious, like maybe both. I'm just curious, like where we feel like there could be the most momentum on something like this. Just yeah, recognizing like if we compare ourselves to a city, it's like slightly different given the rurality and the number of districts. Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think the answer is both. I think we need to do both. Obviously, municipalities have a lot of control over certain elements of housing policy, like zoning, for example. There have been a lot of campaigns in various municipalities in Vermont, including where I live in Montpelier, around, for example, just cause eviction policies. So charter changes at the local level that would end no cause eviction. So in Vermont, right, we have no cause eviction. Tenants can be evicted for no reason at all. The landlord doesn't even have to provide a justification when the eviction happens, and that perpetuates the homelessness crisis that we see. In fact, one of the unhoused folks who recently died was no cause evicted. So that's an area where I think we can have an impact at the local level. When it comes to school boards and collective bargaining, school boards are not the select board, they're not the city council. They have a little bit, they don't have a whole lot of power around housing in particular, but that doesn't mean a local union couldn't put bargaining demands on the table to say, we want you to school board. We think you should endorse a policy like just cause eviction. We think you should work with city council or the select board to think about developing, for example, workforce housing for our teachers and support staff. So I think there are levers that we can pull with the school board to work with local and select boards. And then at the state level, the landscape is a little bit different. There is a group called Rights and Democracy, which many of you are probably familiar with, that's working on housing policy at the state level. They have a housing justice campaign going on right now to address a few key policy areas. One is like a statewide just cause eviction. They're also looking at a statewide rental registry, which we don't currently have. So the rental market is like really, there's like no transparency, nobody's tracking what's going on. Tenant weatherization, and also rent control policies. So those are things that that we're going to see at the state level, but there's a lot of opposition to all of those things in the state legislature because a majority of our representatives happen to be landlords, so they don't like those policies.
I have a good friend who works for the poverty unit in the legal aid office in Montpelier, and the just cause eviction, it's something that they've been fighting for the past several years. And again, I just think again about partnering, like who are our community partners that we can be working with to on these issues, and again using our numbers in our favor.
Do you have thoughts, Elisha?
I don't have many thoughts about short-term solutions, although I find myself nodding my head as I hear the ideas that you all are sharing, given what you're seeing in your specific communities. I'm wondering about what we might posit, I don't know exactly who we are, but what we might posit as long-term, very long-term goals and campaigns, or maybe not very long, but midterm, like thinking ahead to 2028. What do we want to be on the various party platforms of people who are running for national office and state office in 2028? And how can we influence Balint, Welch, Sanders now in terms of the Democrat platform? Some of these, I mean, it's almost like, feels like housing is like climate change. It's like, it feels to me like so overwhelmingly massive and national. And as I watch this nation's resources like flood out the door in order to like perpetuate American empire abroad, I can't take my eye off the national level of funding for the basic needs of people. So I'm just, that's where my mind is going, is like, what about 2028? What can we do now to influence the Republican and Democrat and other third-party platforms to influence national policy and put militarism in the mix, because that's where a lot of our money goes.
Yeah, that makes me think, Elijah, and I'm thinking about what you said earlier, Tracy, too, because I had the same thought in the fall, when the hotel evictions happened. And I think, like, yes, the big picture organizing is so important. And, what would happen if like educators had taken to the streets, when those evictions were happening, and what would have happened if educators had gone to those hotel sites and the media had come and followed, because it would have not at all fixed the problem, not at all. And it would have kept students and families with a roof over their head and with shelter for this amount of time when we're seeing literal deaths from this crisis that's happening, and so I think I just think there's real power to like building this culture of social justice and a level of militancy within our union where we could start to show up for things like this, like in real moments of crisis, like a big mobilization.
Right. And Tracy, I just want to clarify, when you say within our union, are you talking about the NEA? Because, Joe, I'm so grateful for the work you do, but I have to say I'm so frustrated right now with Vermont NEA. Like, they literally do not even respond to my phone calls and emails. Like, sorry, not you, Joe.
I'll respond quickly.
No, it's okay.
I've never called you, Joe.
Yeah.
It's okay.
But
I'd be curious to know who you're calling, Tracy, if they're not responding to you.
Colin
Robinson.
Yeah. I am curious, kind of like what Tracy's saying is like, what are the steps we can start taking now so that 1 to 2 years from now, when they kick people out of hotels again, we can do something about it, right? And so it's like maybe starting a housing caucus, having that group do education, having that pass a resolution at the I know resolutions don't mean a lot, but at least they can be like an organizing tool to start putting forth what are our agreements, what are our demands, passing a resolution at the March NEA. I don't know. I'm just thinking about like what are small steps that we can start taking now to set us up to be more militant, radicalized, organized, willing to take action, in communication, in relationship. So it's not, Tracy out here and whatchamacallit, when so and so out here and whatever, all really frustrated that the union's not doing anything, but we haven't like built the power to actually do that. So yeah, I'm just curious about other thoughts around like what does it mean to build towards something like a militant union that can take action, take to the streets. Yeah, Elijah, do you?
Well, I'm wondering about connections to other unions because you could easily see it play out that like, oh, the teachers took to the streets. Great. Yeah, they just don't want to work. They get the summers off. Like, what are the connections we can make between to other unions in Vermont and have similar caucusing and platforms? Because if the guys who deliver people's home heating fuel won't get in their trucks the same day that the teachers won't go to school, that's a different situation in terms of power. Teachers stay home for snow days all the time. Like, what's the big deal? I got to take care of my kid. Like, we need to connect to other workforces, whether it's like General Strike 2028 or whether it's the next housing thing in Vermont 2025. Like, there has to be, I think, some connections to other sectors.
I like that.
I'm closing, but we have a minute left.
Can I just add?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, so just to respond to Alyssa's question, there are several intervention points within your own union. So there's obviously the local level. So for you, Tracy, that would be the Caledonia Central Education Association. That's always a good place to start because you're going to have more influence there than you would have at the state level. At the state level, we have a board of directors who are elected by the members. Each region has 2 elected board members. I would start by reaching out to your board members, letting them know you're passionate about housing. What can we do about housing? Alyssa also mentioned the representative assembly that happens in the spring. That's a great place to introduce resolutions around issues that people care about and get other members interested and engaged. So like, for example, passing a resolution to create a housing justice committee, right?
Yes, that's good.
And then came back.
All right, Perry, do you want to lead a little sharing out of the groups? Or I don't know, I just started talking, so not to put you on the spot, I can do it too if you want. You had the great idea of having groups share out. Are you in the middle of eating?
I am.
Okay.
Raised into my mouth.
I can share for the group, Perry, since we said I could. Okay.
Okay. I guess Robin just
share what topic you were.
We'll start with Robin. Why don't we do Robin and then the other housing person can share, and then we can do immigrant rights breakout groups, and then the 2 funding issues, and we'll just go in that order and just share a few highlights from what you talked about.
So my group talked about housing and what a struggle it is in Vermont and kind of some cultural, socioeconomic context for different things that are going on with housing here. We talked about specifically the repeated struggle of having it be a barrier to hiring qualified educators, and specifically BIPOC educators who are really, someone shared about specifically folks who they really felt like were the best fit for working with students who had the most need, and then not being able to hire those folks because of literally not being able to find any housing. And then we talked a little bit about climate and its effect on housing here. And some people specifically were sharing about what they felt like was going well with their schools in kind of not creating this barrier between like kind of othering maybe folks who are struggling with housing, like making that actually like this is all of us and this is our community issue, versus like just kind of having it be like a taking donations for these kind of invisible others. And yeah, it sounded like having it be more like kind of like a community based, like a swap, or people just coming out together to, like, the example was like winter gear. And yeah, I don't know, that got my gears going a little bit about like this bigger issue of housing and how we could do that organizing for bigger things like housing. So it was a really cool conversation.
Cool. Yeah, Tracy, you want to share for our group?
Cool. I'm wondering if the other Tracy would want to share. I'm happy to, but
I have to
Tracy
the other
off the
Tracy. I
bench.
think she doesn't.
I don't want to put you on the spot either. Do you want to share?
And I just want to say
No?
thanks
Okay.
for your time, folks. We want to wrap in 5. So
Yep.
yeah.
All right, we'll move it along.
Yeah.
Okay. We also had a great conversation. I think our conversation more ended up going towards like, what can we do as a union to start getting together, to start kind of feeling and building some solidarity, where, you know, when the housing crisis happened, when the hotel eviction crisis happened this fall, could educators have been out in the streets? Could we have gone to those hotel sites? Like, what could we have done? And how can we build power so that we could mobilize in that way? So we started talking about potentially, bringing a resolution to the NEA in the spring that could start a housing caucus within the union. And we talked about starting to connect with some state level organizations that are already doing some of this work. And we had folks in our breakout room who are already connected with these places. So I was feeling pretty inspired about the like network and connections that already exist within our state and within our union too. Oh, and one other really quick point. Elijah brought up a really good point about gaining solidarity with unions of other sectors, so not just educators' unions. And I think there are some folks in this here at this event tonight who are in those other unions, but the power of that potential too. Okay, how about the first immigrant rights group?
And I think I'm just going to ask folks to share like 1 or 2 big things that stood out. So we'll quickly move through.
Hi, I was assigned as Chair Outer. So I'll add a little bit. I think something we were chatting towards the end of our conversation was about how difficult it was to like get members to see the connection to different causes and struggles. And it's more than just your health insurance. It's about connecting with other issues and people. And I wonder, like, I'm not a teacher and I'm not in a union, but I work for a climate organization that it's the same thing. It's like people are like rallying for like an energy bill, but like don't see how it's connected to housing or, you know, migration and immigration rights. And so similar issues across movement spaces, which I thought was interesting. And so, yeah, how do we foster just more conversations with the people who are like thinking, who are weaving together ideas and just create more spaces for that coalition building? And that's something that I'm taking away from that conversation. And I'm going to pass it to you, Emma, to see if you want to add anything. But
I think that's great. We'll pass it on.
Great.
Just with the first budget group, I think we're up next. Gus volunteered. One thing that really stood out was just like how complicated our statewide finances is, and then this like weird irony that a lot of teachers find themselves in, where they're advocating for not increasing, but just cost of living and fair wages. But then also that is as a direct result, or not a direct, a very indirect result, leads to their own property tax increases. So just this really weird dynamic that a lot of us are finding ourselves in.
All right, and in the other budget group, we talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about like the impact of flooding on property values and opportunities to connect those issues and organizing campaigns. We talked about like the power of bringing students into kind of understanding the budgets and yeah, sort of the radicalizing effects of that. We talked about healthcare and just like the tremendous driver of budget costs and the potential for like statewide action around universal healthcare. Um, we talked about kind of the framing of social justice unionism as opposed to like rank and file and sort of like the importance of power building and the tendency of those maybe worlds to sometimes be siloed. Yeah, and we yeah talked about also like the challenges of trying to organize in a context where there's like hostility, like community hostility or hostility on the school board. So, all right, and so I'm gonna throw up one last slide, which just starts out with some images from around the country of militant social justice unionism in action, vision of where we hope to go. And to get there, oh, I wasn't screen sharing, was I? Sorry. All right. My
And
bad.
I think we might have missed one group. And so if we did miss a group, if you want to share in this chat, well, apologies for that and can invite you to do that.
We just have a couple last quick asks. I don't think I'm the one who's talking about this, but
I can do it if you want. I can't remember what I'm doing. Okay. So we have some potential to have like regional gatherings just to continue these discussions and try to build more relationships in person with folks in your area. It's a little TBD depending on interest and leadership. But please fill out our closing survey because we'd love your feedback. We'd love to know, do you want more of this? If so, what topics? What do you want to do together? Would you be interested in helping host a regional gathering or coming to one? I'll also share, just because it feels very related, is that Education Justice Coalition, along with some immigrant rights groups, including Migrant Justice, who I think is here right now, is working on a sanctuary schools model policy and some resources that go with that, like training and tools and know your rights. Yeah, and we'd love folks that are here, especially that are teachers or community members, to take that on as an organizing project and a way to start, yeah, moving your union. And so we'll share out about that through our Edge listserv and through this list in the next month or so. I don't know if anyone else leading has any other brief announcements. But I think that's it. We really, really appreciate your feedback. It just takes like 2 or 3 minutes to fill out. So appreciate folks filling that out. And I'm going to stop the recording.
Yeah. And I guess I would just say thank you all for being